After the Soviets got their first jet fighters going with the MiG-9 and Yak-15, work immediately began on the next generation. The Mikoyan Guryevich Design Bureau started working on using swept wings to help increase maximum speed, while Alexander Yakovlev used his political connections to persuade the Soviet government to try and purchase some advanced jet engines from the United Kingdom. To everyone in the Soviet leadership's surprise, in 1947 the Brits agreed and sold them a small batch of Rolls-Royce Nene and Derwent engines. The Soviets immediately copied these engines and put Soviet versions into production, then tasked the design bureaus with producing new fighters to use them. The MiG Bureau's new jet not only used the new engines, but also the new swept-wing design that they had been working on, and this new airplane, called the I-310, first flew on December 30th of 1947, then entered mass production as the MiG-15 in the following year. The MiG-15 was primarily intended to be an interceptor like the MiG-9 before it. At the time, manned bombers capable of carrying atomic bombs were seen as the primary military threat to the Soviet Union, and as a result, it was armed with a trio of heavy cannons capable of tearing a bomber in half with just a short burst. The MiG-15bis was an improved version that entered service in 1950 and featured an upgraded engine, air brakes, a couple of hardpoints for external weapons, and also swapped out the smaller cannons with a more reliable model in the same caliber. The jet's big claim to fame was its service during the Korean War, where it shocked American pilots when the previously unknown jet proved quite effective at its original job of shooting down B-29 bombers, and ended up being a competent dogfighter as well. The exact kill ratios vary depending on who you ask, and it also depends if you count MiGs against bombers, F-86s, F-84s, Meteors, Navy jets, prop fighters, and so on, or if you limit it to just MiGs versus F-86s. But regardless, the jet was considered by everyone to be at least as good as anything the West was flying at the time. The Bis ended up being the main production version of the plane, with over 10,000 built in multiple countries. What we get in Warthunder are 4 versions of the MiG-15bis. We have the Soviet and German versions in their respective tech trees, a Hungarian version in the Italian tech tree, and the Chinese J2, which was just the Chinese designation for the MiG-15bis that they imported from the Soviet Union. All of them are identical, and all are in Rank 5 at Battle Rating 8.3. I flew out all of them in preparing this review, but I'm not covering the premium MiG-15bis ISH here, although much of this review applies to that jet as well. This plane carries a trio of punchy cannons, one 37mm N37D, and a pair of 23mm NR23s. Not a lot of ammo though, and it's worth remembering that the 3 of them have completely different ballistics. If you want to take your MiG-15 gameplay to the next level, you can use your switch primary weapon keybind to fire only one size of cannon at a time, getting more overall trigger time, but at the cost of less firepower per second, and needing to adjust to different ballistics when you switch cannons. The MiG-15bis also gets 2 hardpoints for external weapons, mainly a pair of small bombs or some unguided rockets. The S-21s are notable as you can set them with a distance fuse and use them as sort of improvised flak rockets in air combat, though it's a bit memey, while the S-5 rocket pods are primarily for ground attack. Up in the air, this plane is kinda complicated. One of the first things you're going to notice about the MiG-15bis is the excellent acceleration. Unless it gets a full up tier, the jet tends to shoot out ahead of most of its teammates on takeoff, and this also translates into a pretty good rate of climb. Another strength of this jet is its high altitude performance, which doesn't really drop off nearly as quick as most other non-afterburning jets in this BR range, so if you can actually get similar planes to fight you up at high altitude, it's sometimes just a free kill. However, you have to be careful going up high, as the dive performance in the MiG-15 can be a little dangerous. You'll usually hit an aerodynamic wall before the wings rip off, but The controls start locking up really bad above 950 kilometers an hour, so if you don't pull out of a dive quickly enough, it can sometimes set you up as a lawn dart. This makes the plane a little less suited for boom and zone vulture tactics unless you stay only slightly above the targets, or use spiraling attacks to dive in on them with a little bit more of a controlled flight profile. The good news is that the plane has air brakes, which help quite a bit, but you're still going to want to watch that airspeed pretty carefully. Some more good news is that the energy retention in this jet is outstanding. Like, to the point where it can be a problem sometimes, and it's really easy for opponents to force an overshoot against an attacking MiG-15. The throttle and air brake controls are going to be your best friends, and don't hesitate to use vertical maneuvers as a way to maintain your overall energy state while still gaining angle on a target. This brings us to the MiG-15's biggest weakness. The rate of roll is simply awful at any airspeed. This has some significant consequences for its combat tactics, which I'll get to in a moment, and it also means that if you're defensive, it's far more difficult to shake somebody off as they can see your maneuvers telegraphed 2 or 3 full seconds in advance. This brings us to actually getting this thing out into air battles. Now, the MiG-15bis recently got a BR nerf, but it's still in a bracket where it can get attacked by IR homing missiles and even semi-active radar missiles in a full up tier. If you're coming up from earlier jets, you'll need to seriously increase your situational awareness and get yourself into the habit of constantly checking around you to be on the lookout for potential missile shooters that are just outside of gun range. At tier, or in a down tier, this is less of a concern and allows the jet to really play to its strengths, mainly its speed and firepower. However, there are some heavy caveats to keep in mind. First, the crappy roll rate makes lining up gunshots incredibly difficult if the target isn't asleep in the cockpit. If you're in a turn going for a deflection shot, it's almost trivial for the target to just change their bank angle slightly on the vertical axis and completely throw off your aim in a way that you can't really correct for before you're out of firing position because your rate of roll is lagging a little behind. Similarly, in a more conventional tail chase sort of a situation, getting accurate fire against targets that are snaking and jinking is almost impossible, since without good roll performance, it's incredibly difficult to adjust your fire to someone bouncing around, and none of the cannons are accurate anyway. Now, the good news is that since the MiG-15 is so good with energy retention and overall maneuverability outside of its roll rate, it's generally not super difficult for you in a one-on-one to just hold your fire and reposition for a second or third pass. Being effective with this jet requires a lot of patience and trigger discipline, and while it usually won't go out and carry the team with 7 kills or whatever, it's still not too difficult to have good matches with practice. There is going to be a learning curve. In terms of ground attack, well, the S5K rocket pods are going to be your best bet for close air support, but you're generally only going to be able to get 1 salvo shot since the ammo count with them is so low. The cannons can damage or occasionally take out light and medium vehicles, but for my 5 cents, this is a pure fighter, not a multi-role ground pounder. Visually, I've always thought the MiG-15 is a beautiful aircraft. Between 4 different tech trays, you get a fairly good variety of skins and paint jobs, including some great-looking esports skins. I'm particularly fond of the blue and white skin that the Chinese J2 gets. Landing isn't too hard, but just remember to tilt back a little on final. Players have a tendency to bounce the nose wheel when landing this jet, but it's easily avoided. You can drop gear and landing flaps safely at around 450 kilometers an hour. The cockpit is an older one, but still looks okay for the most part. The forward visibility is highly obstructed, and I had a really hard time with visual aiming with the VR headset, but otherwise the directional visibility isn't too bad, except right out the front. To close out on the MiG-15bis. This jet has serious forward firepower. It has strong acceleration and climb performance. It has great energy retention, and really good overall maneuverability at medium speeds. However, it's got a low ammo count, the rate of roll is pretty awful, and the cannons can be difficult to aim with. The final verdict on the MiG-15bis is that this jet has a lot of quirks and a serious learning curve, which lends to having a little bit of a bad reputation. But if you practice with it, the thing can win almost any one-on-one engagement in its BR bracket. Just watch out for missiles. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this other one.